Hello and welcome to Part 2 of the Evolutionary Service Group, The Scientific Workers. We'll continue our discussion and begin with Convergence of Science and Religion. The Tibetan master DK says that scientists, through the study of the problem of evil, will come to a greater understanding as to its purpose residing in matter or substance. I talked about this at some length in the first podcast on the scientific workers. But from this study will also come an awareness about the inflowing life energies of the soul and its effects on dense matter and etheric substance. This will bring together members of the scientific and religious communities. Religion is concerned with the awakening of the conscious purpose of the soul and form, whereas science is concerned with the activity of the outer form as it lives its own life and eventually becomes subservient to the purposes of the soul. When there is combined subjective realization of all planes of the solar system and the subplanes of the cosmic, energetic, physical plane, DK says in Alice Bailey's A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, it is this realization that will eventually unite science and religion for what the scientist calls energy, the religious man calls God, and yet the two are one being. After the discovery and acknowledgement of the subjective planes as being accepted in the mainstream media via the trained observers, the psychologists, the educators, and the healers services group, and in the public's mind as a fact, the scientist will act as a communicator between the human spirit and the energies and forces which make up forms. With the acknowledgement of unseen forces in science, such as etheric energy, they will come to understand that there is a connection between the healthy body, etheric energy, the mind, or thought forms, and emotions, that is, subjective energies. Scientists help to identify, analyze, and catalog physical, subtle, and etheric environments to prepare for purification and redemption. And this can specifically relate to places where subtle traces of great emotional trauma or atrocities or pollution remain. And we have examples of this at the Chernobyl site in Ukraine, former concentration camps in Europe during World War II, places of massacres of Ukraine and Eastern Europe, and places of the American West. People who are skilled in transforming the energies of trauma on the inner planes can cleanse the dense and subtle atmosphere at these sites. In today's world, there is one person, Thomas Hubel, a German mystic, and his work demonstrates the redemption process. In his case, he's transforming the energies of trauma by helping individuals to heal their trauma with love and contrition through guided meditations. People making up the various religions need to develop within themselves a capacity for knowledge of the real, which is not merely utopian, hopeful, or devotion-driven, but applies to the power of divine in manifestation for helping to solve the problems of the world. For this, members of the world religions need to exercise leadership with esoteric training and soul integration through meditation, and this helps to cleanse and purify the personality and the subjective levels. This brings the lower mind into higher correspondence with the soul and realization and understanding. The esotericist, through self-analysis, purification, and conscious alignment with the soul, helps to acknowledge the soul as the dominant factor in consciousness. Focused meditation using mental techniques allows the individual to seek pure truth and have a direct experience of deity or the soul. Through scientific study and analysis, the individual who's meditating will be able to distinguish the real from the unreal and the self from the not self. Those esoterically motivated are driven towards finding truth through inquiry and observation in meditation, and they understand the importance of impersonality and becoming the observer and negating all that blocks soul connection. The combination of scientists and people in the field of religion are already helping to focus the green environmental movements for protecting the earth as stewards. Pope Francis is a trained biochemist. In many ways, Pope Francis has acknowledged science as a way of learning and means for living in the world. Over the years, he has urged governmental leaders and everyday people around the world to care more for the environment and the reality of climate change. Many of his messages state that we need to move away from the attitude of having dominion over the earth, but instead encourages stewardship of it. We'll turn now to science and education. In the 21st century, science-based education is often around technology and how it can be applied in a specific discipline of science. Science technology studies are designed for those with a STEM or science, technology, engineering, and mathematics aptitude. A STEM education depends on the teacher's ability to integrate philosophy, science knowledge, and education in a meaningful way. Members of the Educator Service Group emphasize studies around developing the individual's mental cognitive ability. And this would help now and into the future, or into the new age, individuals who are working in the sciences for enhancing their perception and sensitivity of phenomena on the inner planes, such as describing etheric energy and studying its effects. With STEM education, not all women and girls have the same opportunity as men. From the American Association of University Women website, they quote, "Girls and women are systematically tracked away from science and math throughout their education, at least in the United States. And this limits their access, preparation, and opportunities to go into these fields as adults. By giving women equal opportunities to pursue and thrive in, STEM education careers helps narrow the gender pay gap, enhances women's economic security, and ensures a diverse and talented STEM workforce and prevents biases in these fields and the products and services they produce." While there is no mandates in government, industry, or education for promoting women in STEM careers, there are positive trends for this to turn around and accepting all who are qualified. Throughout esotericism, the concept of equality for all is a major theme, as its philosophy negates any forms of separatism, gender limitations, exclusivity, and bigotry. Let's talk now about the promotion of science by different service groups. With the coming New Age, or Aquarian Age, we will see how various evolutionary service groups promote the importance of science in society. For example, the Trained Observers Service Group is primarily represented by broadcast journalists. They will promote good journalistic practices, present factual scientific truth, and straight understanding of science. For example, the astronomer Neil deGrasse Tyson reports scientific insights in astronomy and physics in an effort to demystify the science. The TV show Nova promotes many scientific findings and explanations in numerous fields of science. The Magnetic Healers Service Group is already operating with all forms of allopathic healing practices for the physical needs of the patient. In the coming Aquarian Age, healing practices will shift towards healing ailments of the personality as the source of personal problems. At that time, a connection with the soul and working with the etheric energies will be the most valuable tools. For the Educators and Political Observer Service groups, they will help define education standards and needs and right allocation of funding towards the sciences. This would also require politicians to understand the technology, to ask intelligent questions prior to funding. Funds in the Aquarian Age will be allocated toward all activities and sciences that promote life and provide value to society and civilization. With this awareness, funding would be deflected away from funding military, except defense, and defunding any activity that promotes conflict and separation in society. The scientists, in collaboration with the Psychologist Service Group, would help in defining right ethics throughout the different fields of science. Let's turn now to challenging the existing paradigm. Albert Einstein said, "We cannot solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them." Scientific research is often sanitized, and workers are limited on what they can say or what they can research within their discipline. For example, climate change, global warming versus global cooling. There's a debate about what is causing climate change. Some say NASA has information that the sun has reduced its solar output and is in the cooling cycle. This directly affects the Earth's weather. Others point to man as being the chief culprit in global warming and climate change. On the EPA.gov website, it states, "To suppress science is to obstruct policy reform and thus impede change. And without change, polluting policies and practices of man will continue to exacerbate the impacts of climate change." During the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States, as early as January of 2020, President Trump deliberately withheld scientific data from the public for political purposes about the coming danger of the COVID virus. This delay undoubtedly cost thousands of lives and delayed critical funding and research to find a cure. So, in essence, suppressing science, whether by delaying publication, cherry-picking favorable research, or gagging scientists, is a danger to public health. Globally, people, policies, and procurement of funding is being corrupted by political and commercial agendas. This must give way to promoting truth and transparency in whatever field of scientific inquiry, regardless of what the data portends. The full disclosure of empirical data supports a higher viewpoint that ultimately protects the public. Let's talk now about ethics and science. The concept of ethics is a discussion that broadly applies to all service groups, but seems particularly applicable to scientific service group. From Alice Bailey's book, Reappearance of the Christ, she says, "The mysteries contain within their formulas and teachings the key to the science which are, in the last analysis, the true source of revelation. It can only be when the mind and the will to good are closely fused and blended, and are thus conditioning human behavior, that the extent of the coming revelation can be safely grasped." For the esotericist, he would ask, how much would this form of energy or widget be used, and when implemented, and does it promote and result in better human relations, truth, accountability, transparency, and how people relate to each other in society? The theory of ethics and ethical behavior might be described as usefulness. With this theory, people choose their actions based on how their decisions will benefit the most people. From this mindset, the decision process is the most significant factor. If the individual does not have a spiritual or moral base, his or her actions cannot be predicted. If ethically or spiritually based, then the individual would have an inner inclination or motivation towards performing actions that benefit society, such as making decisions and engaging in all activities that promote right human relations. And there's also the concept of the rights theory. This says that people can make decisions based on the rights of their society, of what it agrees to, such as what the rights of the Constitution gives us. And this form of ethics comes largely from those nations who are functioning democracies and then allow the individual a considerable measure of freedom for research and development. These rights are not implemented globally, and there's great abuse and misunderstanding as to their meaning and interpretation. Continuing on the theory of ethics, we can talk about virtue. The ethical theory of virtue is about an individual's character and morality and how they're shaped and how his or her life is lived. For this form of ethics, a person who lies and cheats to get ahead in life makes decisions based on advancing his or her own interest, regardless of possible damage to others. Esoterically, we understand that practicing separative behavior creates karma, division, separation, and does not promote a cooperative attitude and negates the principle of sharing. Although many scientists are spiritually guided and work primarily for the benefit of humanity, there are also those who work for personal notoriety or monetary gain. Such an attitude might easily result in making discoveries or creating inventions, for example, for military purposes, which were initially intended for beneficial purposes, but may also be applied to man's detriment. Arguably, there are many who could be found in the ranks of those who undermine the concept of peace by investing in building weaponry for offensive purposes, and therefore give people the provocation for creating or maintaining the conditions which allow for their use. For example, many science and engineering students are exploited by their brilliance and knowledge by working in developing weapons for defense contractors in the United States, such as Northrop Grumman, Lockheed, General Dynamics, and Boeing. These industries are largely about developing weapons. Fridtjof Capra, in his book Turning Point, describes how his discoveries in physics were intended for medical research, but were instead distorted against his wishes toward creating Star Wars particle beam weapon technology. There is the concept around cloning and stem cell research. questions can be raised about who should benefit, or whether specific kinds of biotechnology research, such as gene manipulation to change a baby's genetic characteristics, or cloning animals, for example, leading to cloning, or whether it should go forward or not. Within the field of genetics, an ethical discussion arises from the idea that if one is wealthy and can afford the cost of the science, an individual can cherry-pick the right genes for creating the perfect child, or the military, in this example, can also want to create the super soldier. As of note, many offshoot inventions and technologies developed by NASA and the military have provided tremendous benefit to humanity, such as the integrated circuitry, microwave ovens, water filters, DVRs, photography technology, scratch-resistant lenses, memory foam, cell phone technology, biomedical research, knowledge of space through enhanced telescopes, International Space Station, and piquing interest in youth about space and science, just to name a few. With the dawning of the Aquarian Age, we are still a long ways away from curtailing destructive behavior by individual groups or nations. Funding in the Aquarian Age will be allocated towards all activities and sciences that promote life and deflected from military, except defense, and defunding any activity that promotes conflict and separation in society. Through the activities of spiritually minded and responsible scientists, they will help to shape ethical research for bringing forth accountability and right behavior that benefits society and helps to enable the manifestation of the plan. So let's turn now to the actual sciences of esotericism that will be developed in the coming Aquarian Age. The teachings of Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey, DK, reflect a mental approach toward all aspects of life and its activities. Through their writings, they have promoted the sciences of esotericism. While emotion is not dismissed, it is developed within the aspirant to become responsive and not reactive to impulses from the higher mind. Here, the soul is a guide for the whole human mechanism. Occultist or esotericists approach esotericism as a science embodying in different aspects. The first being the science of the soul, and this would be the study of the human mechanism, the centers of the chakras, the study of etheric energy through the centers and vital body, the study of the glands and human behavior, the study of the personality and the threefold vehicles through expression, threefold being mental, emotional, and physical. The mind development and learning to connect with the spiritual triad, made up of the Atma, which is the will aspect, the Buddhi, which is the intuitive aspect, pure reason, and of course Manas, which is the highest aspect of the soul or the thinking capacity. We can talk about mind development and learning to connect with the spiritual triad. And they'll be studying parts of the mind, such as the concrete or conceptual, and the abstract, and again, the Manas. There'll be the unfoldment of the petals of the egoic lotus. There'll be progress in spiritual evolution through discipleship and initiation. There is the science of cosmic fire, referring to a book written by Alice Bailey in 1925, and refers also back to The Secret Doctrine written by Blavatsky in 1888, which she describes many of the properties of the universe and describing how the planets and the various forms are entities. They're actually living. There's a consciousness about the universe and about all this, about the study of the fires and friction and inertia, the solar fire from the soul to be studied through the light of wisdom, radiating through the form and the groups and the lives, animated by a radiant energy. Talk about electric fire and how the planetary logos manifest as aspects of will, spiritual impulse or purpose, and the groups of lives animated by dynamic energy. There's much to talk about here, but this goes way beyond the scope of this podcast. The science of esoteric astrology. Esoteric astrology has been called the science of all sciences. It is a study of how the soul influences the personality through planetary influences, and it deals with the consciousness aspect of man, its expansion, and that which conditions the personality. In this light, it is primarily concerned with the soul and not with the form nature. It is a system where the astrologer finds relationships between individual planetary, solar, systemic, and cosmic entities. And it describes the qualities, the energies, and the forces and characteristics of these living entities and allows comprehension and understanding of how they interact with each other. Again, another science which goes way beyond the scope of this discussion. The science of esoteric healing. This can go into discussing the causes of disease, not just physical or through heredity, but analysis from a psychological point of view. And this would be studying how stress and thought forms affect the consciousness, the mind, the emotions, and the physical form, the body. Study the processes of soul integration and identify cleavages, what the blockages in consciousness that keeps from soul contact, and the elimination, of course, of any blockages. There is the science of meditation or contact, which is talking about, once again, connecting with the soul. You develop contact with the intuition and the spiritual triad through meditation and with mental techniques, visualization. You help to develop the human mind as a faculty and the mechanism of the soul. There would be research about how the observer develops his consciousness through instinct, intellectual development, developing the intuition resulting in illumination. Research would be on the effects on the human mind. There would be study of the science of invocation and evocation. And this is about man's approach through aspiration and how he connects with the hierarchy and with divinity or God. With sincere aspiration, the hierarchy responds through impression. I talked about this with the Religious Workers podcast. You can get more information about invocation and evocation. Let's turn now to new directions for scientific servers. Science should work toward the pursuit and implementation of those discoveries that benefit, uplift, and propel civilization into an ethical and creative expression with cooperation and harmlessness at its core. This would involve investigating and acknowledging the building forces of the universe, the existence of the soul, the subjective realms, and the energies of the etheric body. Through these studies, a scientist will learn to bridge the abstract mind and connect with the soul through the Buddhic or the intuitional plane, and thus expand his capacity for directly knowing these higher realms. From this, the scientific workers will be able to relate the subhuman kingdoms with the human kingdom through a right interplay of forces. These will open up subjective connections, such as building the antakarana, or the bridge to connect with the spiritual triad from the conceptual mind through the soul to the spiritual triad. And this has hindered humanity's approach to connecting also with the hierarchy. After these discoveries are accepted, the scientist will act as a communicator between the soul and human spirit and the energies and forces which make up the forms. This type of observation would require the scientist to look into the etheric realms and to see how the Deva kingdom, the angelic kingdom, makes up forms and provides analysis of their modes of building. For science-based education should not just be STEM-based, but provides a mental framework for observing the inner and outer planes and all its phenomena. A mental orientation and thinking can be applied towards the activity of all the evolutionary service groups. Other activities for the scientist in the coming Aquarian age will be concerned with the problem of reincarnation. And under the law of rebirth, this problem deals with an object taking a certain outer garment, then it is reduced or transformed into another form altogether. This is related to discovering the motivating energy that penetrated the outer form and the one who creates the new forms as an expression of the inflowing spiritual life. This would also involve a study of the problem of evil and its relation to substance and how eventually the soul turns the incarnating personality towards the light of understanding and desire for direct knowing. In today's world, the science of sustainability is crucial for tackling many problems related to protecting the environment, for finding solutions, for curbing or eliminating pollution, and for man to become a caretaker and steward of the earth. This would be a change in attitude from having dominion over the earth to becoming a steward. Scientists must partner with government, religious leaders, psychologists, and people in industry to obtain funding for creating products and projects that sustain and benefit mankind. By enabling the principles of sustainability through continual R&D for innovation, energy savings, corporate and social responsibility, and recycling will continue to encourage an attitude of stewardship toward all the service groups. Scientists are on the forefront of tackling the major problems confronting humanity. These will not be overcome unless we have leaders with vision and courage in all of the sciences. This concludes a discussion on the Scientist Evolutionary Service Group.